Part 1. The inner abyss no one sees. There is a kind of silence that doesn't scream. A silence that lives inside the highly intelligent loner, not as absence, but as presence so deep, so vast, that words collapse under its weight. Most people will never realize this. They see a quiet person, a distant gaze, a habit of avoiding the crowd. What they do not see is the storm beneath that stillness, the labyrinth of thought, the symphony of perceptions echoing within. In the first few seconds, you may think this is about being introverted or shy. It is not. This is not about personality. It is about perception so heightened that the world becomes overwhelming and underwhelming at the same time. You are not just quiet. You are watching. You are absorbing details that others miss. While most people move fast to keep up with the world, you move inward to keep up with yourself. You do not just hear conversations. You hear the fear behind words, the emptiness behind smiles, the truth behind polite lies. You dissect every encounter with surgical precision, not because you want to, but because you cannot help it. Your mind is not still. It is a deep sea, and you are always diving. From the outside, it looks like detachment. From the inside, it feels like immersion. You are immersed in layers of thought, of meaning, of contradiction. You wonder why people do what they do, why they say one thing and feel another, why they cling to illusions and flee from truth. And then you wonder something more dangerous: if you are the one who is wrong. Because the more you see, the more isolated you become. And no one tells you what that kind of isolation does to the soul. The first truth no one tells you is this: highly intelligent loners often live in exile, not from society, but from emotional familiarity. You rarely feel fully met. Even in groups, you hover at the edge. Even in relationships, you orbit around a center that feels foreign. And here is where the silent depth begins to form, in that perpetual feeling that you are watching life from behind a one-way mirror. You can see them. They can't see you, so you retreat. Not out of bitterness, but out of exhaustion. Emotional noise becomes unbearable. Small talk becomes painful. Superficiality becomes a slow death. You crave conversations that peel back the layers, that hurt in a beautiful way. Conversations where silence is not awkward, but sacred. But such conversations are rare. So you turn inward. You begin to write, to think, to wander. And in doing so, you descend into a place most people will never dare enter: the unfiltered truth of your own mind. Philosopher Blaise Pascal once said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." But you, the highly intelligent loner, have mastered that room. You do not fear it. You become it. You sit with questions that have no answers. You face emotions that have no name. You stare into the void until the void blinks. And that is where the transformation begins.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
But the journey is not linear. It is cyclical. There are nights when your mind feels like a curse. Too loud, too complex, too aware. You feel everything and nothing. You want connection but reject shallowness. You desire meaning but choke on the absurdity of it all. And this is where you encounter the second truth no one tells you. Your intelligence does not protect you from suffering. It amplifies it, because you don't just suffer. You analyze your suffering. You track its roots, map its consequences, question its purpose. You know when you're self-sabotaging, and you do it anyway. You know when a feeling is irrational, and still it consumes you. You are too aware to be ignorant, too introspective to be impulsive, and yet too human to be untouched. This is the paradox of your existence. Knowing doesn't always free you. Sometimes it traps you. And yet, within that trap, there is a hidden door. A door that opens only when you stop resisting your depth, when you stop trying to be understood and start understanding yourself, when you stop fearing the silence and start listening to it. That door leads to something few people ever experience: internal sovereignty. A kind of peace that does not depend on others. A kind of clarity that cannot be shaken. This is when you begin to see the world not just as it is, but as it pretends to be. You see the masks, the performances, the unspoken contracts people sign to avoid discomfort. You see how people trade authenticity for acceptance, and you refuse, not out of pride, but out of necessity. You cannot betray your depth just to be tolerated. You cannot abandon your truth just to be liked. You would rather walk alone than walk in circles. This is where your strength begins to emerge. Not as dominance, but as presence. Your presence is quiet, but undeniable. You do not need to compete. You do not need to prove. You simply are. And in being, you challenge everything. You become a mirror. And that mirror makes people uncomfortable, not because you judge them, but because they see themselves too clearly around you. But here's the third truth no one tells you: your silence speaks. It speaks volumes. It reveals what others try to hide. It exposes what words try to cover. Your silence is not absence. It is density. It is the weight of everything you could say but choose not to. And that choice is not weakness. It is power, because only those who have mastered the noise within can command silence without. Now pause and ask yourself this: what if your silence is not a void, but a vessel? What if it is carrying something sacred, a vision, a truth, a frequency the world desperately needs but cannot yet hear? Are you willing to carry it, even if no one acknowledges it? Are you willing to live with that depth, even if it isolates you? Because this is the path of the highly intelligent loner. It is not glamorous, it is not easy, but it is real. And in a world drowning in illusions, that reality becomes a revolutionary act. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to understand yourself so deeply that others begin to remember their own truth in your presence. This is not philosophy for the sake of theory. This is lived wisdom. This is the kind of intelligence that breaks patterns, that dissolves conditioning, that rewrites entire lives from the inside out. And it begins not with noise, but with stillness. Not with answers, but with the courage to ask the questions no one else dares to ask. You are not just thinking differently. You are being differently. And that difference is your gift. That difference is your rebellion. That difference is your invitation to a deeper way of living, of seeing, of creating. Part 2. The world you see but cannot speak. You've entered the realm where silence becomes a form of language, where the unspoken becomes more meaningful than what is said. At this stage of the journey, you begin to notice something strange. You are not experiencing life the way others do. You see the underneath of things. In every conversation, there is a subtext. In every smile, a shadow. In every decision, a hidden motivation. And the more aware you become, the more you feel like you're watching a movie you can't unsee. A movie that most people don't even know they're in. This is where the silent depths evolve from mere observation to perception. You're not just noticing the world, you're decoding it. Every interaction becomes a puzzle. Every reaction becomes a signal. You begin to identify patterns in human behavior that others miss. The way someone avoids eye contact when they lie. The way a person's voice tightens when they're hiding something. The way people use humor to avoid pain. And yet, you don't call them out. You simply know. And that knowing becomes both a gift and a burden. Because here's the truth no one tells you. When you see too much, it becomes harder to participate. You can't laugh at the same jokes, fake the same rituals, or pretend not to notice the cracks. You're expected to play along, but you can't. Not because you're arrogant, but because you're awake. And being awake in a sleeping world is not a badge of honor. It's a weight you carry in silence. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "And those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music." But what if you're the one hearing all the music? The joy, the sorrow, the confusion, all at once. What if your mind is a symphony of awareness that never stops playing? You're not just in tune with your own thoughts. You're in tune with the collective frequency. You feel the grief in the room before anyone cries. You sense the tension before it erupts. You know when something is off, even if no one says a word. This level of perception creates a new kind of loneliness. It's not the loneliness of being alone. It's the loneliness of knowing things that others aren't ready to confront. And the deeper the knowing, the harder it becomes to explain. Not because the language doesn't exist, but because most people don't want to hear it. They want comfort, not clarity. They want affirmation, not awakening. And so you learn to hold your insights quietly, like burning coals in your chest. But here's where the transformation deepens. You begin to realize that your silence is not just a defense mechanism. It is a container, a sacred space where wisdom incubates. You stop trying to explain yourself to people who aren't listening. You stop trying to fit into rooms that don't value depth. And as you do, something remarkable happens. You begin to create your own world. Not a fantasy, but a frequency. A life aligned with your truth, not the expectations of others. You begin making decisions not based on logic alone, but on resonance. You can feel when something is right, not because it makes sense, but because it carries a certain energy. You trust your intuition, not as a mystical force, but as a finely tuned instrument that has been sharpened by solitude. You sense when to act, when to wait, when to walk away. And this intuitive intelligence becomes your compass in a world that has forgotten how to feel. But that wisdom must be guarded, because the world does not always respect what it does not understand. People may call you cold, aloof, even arrogant. They may project their discomfort onto you. But deep down, you know the truth. You are not here to entertain. You are here to embody. You are not a product of the world. You are a reflection of what the world has lost: presence, authenticity, and the courage to think independently. This is where you begin to step into your quiet power. You no longer shrink to make others comfortable. You no longer dilute your insights to be accepted. You speak when it matters, and when you do, people listen. Not because you raise your voice, but because your words carry weight. They come from silence, from reflection, from a depth that cannot be faked. And in a world of noise, that kind of voice cuts through everything. But the journey is not without challenge. There will be moments when your mind turns against you, when the same depth that gives you clarity also brings you despair. You will question the point of seeing so much, feeling so deeply, thinking so endlessly. You will wish at times that you could turn it off, that you could be like others, simple, unaware, at peace in the shallows. But that is not your path, and if you tried to follow it, you would only betray yourself. Instead, you learn to hold the depth, to stabilize in it. You begin to build rituals that protect your mind. You curate your environment, your relationships, your input. You treat your mind like a sacred garden, pruning what is toxic, watering what is true. And slowly, you realize that the depth is not your enemy. It is your teacher. It is showing you what is essential, what is real, what is timeless. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But what he didn't say is that the examined life is often excruciating. It requires facing your own illusions, your own contradictions, your own darkness. And yet, it is the only life that leads to freedom. Not the freedom of having no rules, but the freedom of seeing clearly, of knowing who you are, what you value, and what you're here to do. This is when your depth begins to crystallize into purpose. You realize that your silence, your perception, your solitude, they are not accidents. They are preparation. Preparation for a life of meaning. Preparation for a role not defined by titles, but by impact. You become a quiet revolutionary, not by resisting the world, but by reimagining it from within. And now I ask you a question that only you can answer. What truth have you been carrying in silence, waiting for the right moment to release? What insight have you buried out of fear that no one would understand? What message have you been chosen to deliver, not loudly, but clearly? Because you weren't given this depth to drown in it. You were given it to offer something no one else can. Not everyone will hear you. Not everyone will see you. But those who are ready, those who have also walked the silent path, they will recognize you. And in that recognition, something ancient awakens. A remembering, a resonance, a quiet revolution. In the final part of this journey, we will explore what happens when the highly intelligent loner steps into the world fully, not to conform, but to create, not to escape others, but to serve without losing self. We will uncover the ultimate purpose of the silent depths and how they are not just a refuge, but a source of power unlike anything the world expects. Part 3. The quiet force that reshapes reality. There comes a moment in the life of a highly intelligent loner when the silence no longer feels like exile. It begins to feel like a source, not a place of hiding, but a place of knowing. You begin to understand that your distance was never about disconnection, it was about calibration. You were tuning out the noise so you could hear the signal. You were stepping back not to disappear, but to see more clearly. And in that clarity, you find something the world is starving for: authenticity without performance. At this point in the journey, something fundamental shifts. You stop seeing your mind as a burden. You stop apologizing for your depth. You stop editing your truth just to be digestible. Instead, you begin to show up fully, honestly, unapologetically. And when you do, people notice. Not everyone, not immediately, but certain people, those who are attuned to depth, will feel your presence like a magnetic field, not because you're loud, but because you resonate. You begin to realize that your presence alone is disruptive, not in an aggressive way, but in a way that gently exposes shallowness. Shallow conversation falls flat around you. Superficiality withers in your company. People either step into greater depth or step away entirely. And that is not rejection, it is refinement. Your life starts to filter itself. The more you live in alignment with your inner truth, the more your outer world begins to reflect that truth. This is where your solitude becomes a gift to others, not because you isolate, but because you return from isolation with something valuable. You return with perspective, with insight, with clarity. You become a kind of philosophical force, a psychological architect. You do not give advice, you give awareness. And that awareness cannot be bought, borrowed, or faked. It can only be earned through silence, through thought, through self-confrontation. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." You stop debating. You become. You embody the peace you once chased. You live the truths you once only spoke. You are no longer driven by reaction. You are driven by vision. And that vision, born in silence, begins to shape your choices, who you spend time with, what you create, how you love, what you tolerate. But the world still won't understand you. Not fully, and that's okay. Because now you understand yourself. You no longer seek mirrors in other people. You've built one within. You no longer need to shout to be heard. Your energy speaks louder than your words. Your eyes carry lifetimes. Your silence has gravity. And those who are ready will feel it. They will feel you. This is where you begin to lead. Not by position, but by presence. You led by being the calm in the storm, the depth in the noise, the truth in the chaos. You may not be on stages. You may not have millions of followers, but your impact is not measured in metrics. It is measured in moments. The moment someone finally feels seen, the moment a person hears your words and is never the same, the moment your presence gives someone the courage to face their own truth. But leadership at this level is not about control. It's about invitation. You do not demand change. You embody it. You do not chase influence. You attract resonance. And what you attract is not the crowd, but the aligned. People who are also awake. People who have also walked through fire. People who are done pretending, done performing, done chasing. And together, you build something rare, a space where depth is normal, where silence is sacred, where truth is the only currency. Yet even now, the journey is not over, because the final challenge is not to have depth. It is to use it, to transmute it, to create from it. This is where your mind becomes a tool, not just an observer. You begin to write books, build systems, teach frameworks, initiate projects, design lives. Not to impress, but to express the truth that has shaped you. You become a translator of the invisible, a sculptor of silence, a lighthouse for the quietly drowning. And here is the final truth no one tells you. The more you live in alignment with your silent depth, the more magical life becomes. Not in a fairy tale way, but in a deeply synchronistic, almost mystical way. You begin to meet the right people without trying. You begin to receive insights without effort. You begin to sense guidance that feels ancient, precise, and beyond logic. You don't control life. You collaborate with it. You walk through life like a poem written in real time. Carl Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." You are awake now, not just mentally, but spiritually. You see with both intellect and intuition. You hear the sound beneath sound. You feel the meaning beneath the moment. And that awareness, that fierce, quiet awareness, becomes your legacy. You are not here to be popular. You are here to be true. You are not here to fit in. You are here to remind people who they are beneath the noise. And that reminder doesn't always come through words. Sometimes it comes through how you listen, how you pause, how you exist. So now I ask you, and only you can answer this, what will you do with your depth? Will you continue to hide it, waiting for someone to ask the right question? Or will you begin to live it boldly, quietly, intentionally? Will you let it shape your work, your love, your voice, your presence? Because the world does not need more noise. It needs more depth. And you, perhaps more than anyone, are equipped to give it. You are not a mistake. You are a mirror. You are not a ghost. You are a guide. You are not lost. You are just ahead. And now it's time to return, not to conformity, but to creation. Not to the crowd, but to contribution. Not to noise, but to the silent revolution that changes everything. Because what no one tells you about the silent depths of a highly intelligent loner is that it's not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new world.